Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and friends of the Center, good evening. My name is Ali Khan Versi, and I'm delighted to be your Master of Ceremonies for this evening. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is also covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share for the land and its resources. And now it gives me great pleasure to formally welcome you to the Ismaili Center Toronto for what is the 10th edition of the speaker series entitled The Futures in Conversation, a platform for rigorous dialogue and conversation on the challenges shaping our world and the futures we imagine together. What makes tonight's event so special is that it speaks to something already deeply shaping each of our lives. Whether we realize it or not, AI is no longer a distant concept or a future possibility. It influences how we work, communicate, learn, make decisions, build relationships, and imagine the future. Every industry is being transformed by it, and every one of us is being impacted personally and professionally. That is why this conversation matters so much. This evening brings together leaders who are not only deeply knowledgeable in the field, but who are also willing to explore the human side of this transformation. From psychological safety and trust to innovation, privacy, jobs, and human connection, tonight is about grounding the future of AI in thoughtful dialogue, shared learning, and genuine curiosity about what comes next. Yasmine Roulleau is the co-founder and managing partner of Flywheel Ventures. Yasmine operates at the intersection most people talk about but rarely inhabit: clinical instinct, venture stage risk, and enterprise data strategy in one room. A trained psychiatric nurse turned exited founder, she built and sold a technology company to Deloitte before launching Flywheel Ventures Group. She has spent 18 years identifying where value actually lives in complex systems and making it obvious to the people who need to act on it. At Flywheel, she architects data systems and leads AI readiness programs for organizations navigating the gap between where they think they stand and where they actually are. Nihar Dalmia is the partner and insights lead at Deloitte Canada. Nihar leads Deloitte's insights and engagement practice, data scientists, Gen AI engineers, and information designers working across 3 continents. With 20 years spanning analytics, AI, and technology across banking, government, oil and gas, and healthcare, he connects technical depth to real organizational outcomes. An Oxford MBA and MIT graduate, Nihar has built a consistent track record translating AI strategy into scalable solutions and making the complex legible to the leaders who have to make decisions with it. Following our keynote, we will hear from a powerhouse panel featuring Deloitte Canada's top AI minds: Naomi Chanda, Stefan Popovich, and Arslan Idris, for an honest, grounded conversation about where this is all really going. Yasmine Roulleau will introduce our panelists when we begin the moderated conversation. There will also be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions, and the evening will conclude with refreshments and networking in the atrium. And now, please join me in welcoming our first speaker of the evening, Yasmine Roulleau, to the stage to speak on AI and psychological safety.
Wow. Well, let me start by saying Yali Madat. This is absolutely fantastic. What a beautiful room, and I'm so honored and privileged to be here today. So I'm going to walk us through, for the next 9 to 10 minutes, around psychological safety when it comes to AI. It's an area that I just don't believe we talk about enough. So I always start by saying we're still human. And it's really quite terrifying when we're hearing so much about how AI is taking over. And I really want us to think through what it means to still be human. So, a note before we begin. I declare a portion or all of what you are about to hear has been written, crystallized, synthesized, and shaped with AI. No shame. For sure, AI helped me. That is the point. But the question is whether AI helped build this? Is that the question? Or is the question, where did I show up in that process? And that's really what I want to unpack together today. The tension. So this idea of tension is something that I think is very, very healthy when we think about all concepts of AI. The tension is AI has fast speed. But when we think about speed, what about depth? When we think about access, what about discernment? When we think about output, what about authorship? And when we think about efficiency, what about humanity? Now, these aren't words that necessarily go together, but I want us to kind of reflect on both of those expressions and experiences as we're getting involved deeper with Gen AI and agentic. I'm going to talk a little bit about what both of those things mean. I want us to get to a place where we are not afraid of the tool, but we are afraid of losing the thread. If we're outsourcing the thinking and we are cognitively unloading or offloading, and we are arriving at a destination we never chose to travel toward, that's pretty scary. Now, I can guarantee many people in this room have started working with Claude or Perplexity, and they get in and they have a great idea and they get this output. And then all of a sudden, they start messing with that output. They start asking questions, and before you know it, you have a 100-page document and you're clawing your way back up, trying to go back to that first output because that felt right, and you start to spiral. So I wanted to kind of name that fear, because experts or non-experts, novice or kind of just learning, this is something that I hear about a ton when I'm talking to clients, friends, family. I want to think about reframing what this idea is, and I call it the critical reframe, or AI helped me coin that. So we called it the critical reframe. So this is the idea of the tool mindset. About 6 months ago, you probably heard when people were using OpenAI or an Anthropic, people were starting to get mad at the interaction or thanking the interaction. And it's the idea of a tool mindset. So we are saying, AI, it's software. We need to operate it. You need to configure it, use it, blame it when it fails. The tool sits below you, and you are the operator. This is how most people are approaching AI. And it's, unfortunately, leaving them behind. But yet it's so familiar, because that's how we're being taught to use it, right? We're going in, we're asking it questions. What I want us to think about is the team mindset. Make it your teammate. AI is an extension of your thinking. You bring judgment, lived experience, and the stakes. This is super important. If AI brings scale, speed, and synthesis together, you can produce what you never thought possible and what you could not do alone. This, to me, and what we've seen in the research, is how 1% of top AI users are interacting with AI. So I'm going to let that land for a sec. This idea of having a teammate mindset. Okay? But ironically, I need to stop us and say, you are not the output. What does that mean? We will interact with AI tools, and the output will come, just like this deck, and I will stand here and either be really confident with it, or I'll have to kind of go back and forth and really understand, did it hit what I was hoping that it did? While AI is fluent, it is not wise. It is fast, but it is not curious. Now I'm seeing my colleagues here probably staring at me going, blah, 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 because I know Nihar's going to probably challenge that. While it is comprehensive, it is not yours. I will challenge anyone, because I believe it is not yours. I always think about, where is my IP? What makes me able to stand here? And that's my judgment, my gaps, and my instincts. That's my IP. That's what I bring to the table every single time that I'm interacting, whether it's with Gen AI and Agentic, as you will learn. We've heard this a lot. Many people have heard this, AI is like a PhD in my pocket. It is. I look at it as a library crystallized in a breath. We have access to curated knowledge. What used to take researchers weeks and months, we now have as a starting point, not an end point. It's a starting point. It sequences. AI organizes all of these scattered thoughts into coherent through lines, throughputs. But you bring that sequence, and now you need to make sense of it. And this whole idea of amplifying, this is where I go back to this idea of your expertise is really that flywheel that spins fastest when you as the human are part of it. But the accelerant doesn't choose the direction. I'm going to hone this back in over and over again. You do. Okay? So if you're using AI as an accelerant, remember that you choose that direction, even though it feels like it's already defined that for you. One of the lines that I have probably been saying for the last 2 years every time I lecture is, don't drop the pen. Don't drop your pen. Now, 1.5 years ago when I gave this lecture, I was talking about don't drop your pen because I didn't want to lose musicians in the room. I didn't want to lose poets in the room. I didn't want to lose any of that. But now more than ever, this idea of not dropping the pen is, don't forget where you fit and where you are still adding to the output, because you don't want to be a reader of what you've come out with. You want to be part of it. Okay? So we will talk a lot. Nihar, I'm assuming you'll talk a bit more about Agentic and what's happening there. We do talk a lot about keeping a human in the loop and guardrails. Now, I get really frustrated with these terms because I don't think anybody ever knows what they mean, but they keep saying them over and over and over again. For me, a human in the loop doesn't mean that you need a human at every single step of the process. It just means having a human at the right step. And you might not know that right now, but this is where we need to get to, okay? And many of us are freaking out about jobs. I had a call from one of my best friends this morning going, what's going to happen to my son? What kind of job is my son going to have? And I will stand up here and hopefully someone will quote me in 10 years. I think that we are going to have so many jobs that we didn't even think were possible in this moment in time. I really, really believe that. Because this idea of content reviewers, quality guardians, right? We talk about QA, but what about quality guardians? That only comes with time and scar tissue and learning and training. I believe we're going to see a huge growth in jobs. The last point that I want to make, there's probably just 2 points here left, but the biggest one here is, as you are starting to interact with tools and you pull out an email or you sign something that has your name on it, I really want us to think, and Naomi's going to talk a little bit more about this, I really want us to think about where we sat in that process. Did you read the output and then send it? Did you compose it? Or did you direct it? And this idea of directing is just a thematic that I want us to really think through, because if you're shaping and framing the thinking, you're emphasizing your role in that output. So psychological safety. This is in the context of AI. It's not about the model being safe. It's about you feeling safe enough to think through it and be part of it. It's okay to be wrong in your prompts. In fact, I encourage everyone to be wrong in your prompts. Iterate without shame and own the gaps. As some of you are interacting, it feels really terrible when you get something and you try it a little different and it comes out and it doesn't sound as good, or what you put in, AI makes it sound better. This is where we need to feel psychologically safe that we get to keep doing that. That's the work. So on that note, I'm going to start bringing up Nihar, because I want Nihar to come and talk a little bit about this process of where you are today. So we had an introduction of Nihar, and what I want to really think about here is, I don't want you leaving today going, okay, that's all fine and dandy. What do I actually need to do next? So as Nihar, we heard, he, of course, leads Deloitte's Insight and Engagement practice. He comes from Oxford and MBA. You know, that's pretty big. He's a MIT grad. That's great. We feel excited about that. But what makes me so happy about Nihar is he takes away all of the very, very technical things when it comes to AI, and he makes it accessible and human. So please, please join me in welcoming Nihar to come up and teach us some more.
Okay, thanks for having me here. Yes, that was a very kind introduction. Really appreciate it. Okay, so as Yas said, I'm going to walk you through a few different concepts. But before I do that, who's used ChatGPT here? Almost everyone, right? A year ago or a year and a half ago, there would have been probably one or two hands here. So we're not going to talk about ChatGPT today. We're not going to talk about the best model, whether you're using Gemini or Copilot or all these different tools. What I want to talk to you about is, where's the world going when it comes to AI and where it's come from. So just to zoom out a little bit, we all know AI, it's existed for many years. Think of AI as any sort of computer science or computer solution that can mimic human behavior, right? That's what AI is. But a part of AI is what we call as machine learning. Machine learning, think of this as any AI that can learn from data, whether that's data that we give it, could be in the form of structured data, it could be voice, it could be sound. And then there's deep learning. Deep learning, think of this as AI that improves over time. It's almost like your brain. It has different layers and so on. And then for all of you that put your hand up when I asked whether you use ChatGPT, that is generative AI. Generative AI really is AI that can generate new content. It's not just learning from previous content, but you can create new content. You're seeing a lot of generative AI examples where you can create new videos, sound, and whatnot. This is where we're at today. Where we're heading next is this concept of agentic AI, where not only AI can create new content, but it can do things for you. It can do tasks. It can run a process. It can run your payroll. It can run your finance process. That's where things are going. So just taking a step back, I'm sure all of you have used generative AI in some form, ChatGPT and other tools. But a lot of you may not know how it actually works. Generative AI is nothing but a tool that tries to predict the next word. It doesn't actually know the answer. So when you ask it something, it's trying to predict the most probable next word in the sentence. So I'll go back. If I say a sentence and if you try to complete it, if I say something like, my partner and I are so close that we finish each other's sandwiches, right? So I thought it was sandwiches, you thought it's sentences. They're both right. But the way generative AI works is it's going to give you the most probable answer, right? And so going back to Yas's point, you have to understand how these things work and you have to take responsibility and know how you can apply it as you're using it in your day-to-day life. So generative AI can do many things. It can generate new content. Like I said, it can create new text, images, code. We're in Deloitte using Gen AI to code hundreds and thousands of lines, and it's increased our efficiency incredibly. You can create sound, videos. There's whole movies being made using generative AI. And then also games. Now you can see full digital worlds being created. You can summarize content. So you can summarize an email, a large PDF. You can condense large amounts of information. You can also retrieve information. So you can give it information, and then you can ask it questions about that document. So like I said, this is all generative AI, which is good. We should all use it. We should all experiment with it responsibly. But what comes next is AI agents. So what are agents? Think of agents as computer software that has autonomy. It can do things by itself. So I know that can sound sort of scary. So let's just unpack what that means. Just as humans, we plan our task, we then execute the task, and then we reflect upon it, agents do the same thing. You can give an agent, an AI agent, a task. It'll plan all the 15 steps it has to go through. It'll execute the task. And then it also has a feedback loop where it can then reflect what went right, what went wrong, and it can improve by itself. So then if you take one agent and then you combine many agents together, then you get multi-agent systems that can do many different things together in an entire organization. So that's where we're seeing organizations go, where you can start to create many different agents to do things that otherwise humans would do alone. Okay, so what does that mean if you take it then one step forward? What does an agentic enterprise look like? And then I'll show you an example of what that is. So, over the last couple of years, we've been thinking a lot about this. What is an agentic enterprise? How do you make one? Let's go solve that problem. And what we've realized is that we've been telling a lie to ourselves. The lie we've been saying is that you need to pick the best technology, you need to pick the best data, you need the best model. But in reality, it's all about coordination. It's all about how do we get humans and AI to work together. You hear about a lot of these experiments being done with generative AI and agentic AI, but they all fail because it comes down at the end of the day to how do we embed it within our organization? So how do we make humans and AI work together? That's where the real magic happens. And so I'll just sort of walk you through what typically happens with AI. You tell an AI you need to do something, you define the objective, the AI produces an insight, gives you an answer, and then you wait, right? And then humans take on the work. They have to review that, there's a decision that's deferred, and then it's handed to the next team. And then progress stalls, context is lost. And so what happens is most enterprises don't actually lack intelligence. You can see there is intelligence, but they lack the systems that can carry the intent, your objective of what you want to do from start to finish. And so what's happening is a lot of organizations are stuck in that my bottom right, your bottom right as well, this activity trap where we're doing a lot with AI, but we're actually not doing anything with AI. Because we're doing a lot of these things in individual places, but we're not actually thinking about how do we redefine an organization using AI. So a lot of our clients at Deloitte are trying to move from that activity trap to the top. How do we start to get individual productivity so that everyone can use AI, but use it in a way that's productive? And then get to targeted AI, which is how do you solve end-to-end problems? And then how can we completely rebuild our organization using AI? So this is where the magic happens. This is where you see a lot of these one-person billion-dollar companies. You know, the prediction is the next trillion-dollar company is not going to be one of the Elon Musk companies or the next Steve Jobs companies. It's going to be a one-person company or a two-person company that are built around AI. Okay, so just zooming out again, I said, there was a wave one where we saw a lot of automation happening. A lot of organizations are using automations to make machines follow rules, and therefore you're taking away the day-to-day mundane tasks. It's efficient, but it was brittle. Then came this world of AI analytics, where you taught machines how to predict. You predict repairs and you predict other things. That was insightful, but passive, right? Because you can't do anything with it until humans actually act on it. Then you saw the world of co-pilots, where you can ask it a question, it gives you an answer, and that's so exciting. You can play around with it. It tries to please you. But then what do you do with it? And so the next wave we're seeing is this concept of agentic enterprise or autonomous outcomes, where you can have these agents plan, decompose a task, act, and then adapt. That leads to not just better answers, but autonomous outcomes. So this didn't just happen by chance. It just didn't just happen because someone invented the word agentic enterprise. There are three things that really changed over the last couple of years. Firstly, AI became really smart, so it could reason, and it could plan, it could do different tasks. So as these frontier models that OpenAI and others use, they became really good at reasoning. The second thing that happened was all the systems that you use, whether you use Microsoft systems or SAP and Oracle, all these systems, they all started having these APIs that you can connect to, and then you can use those tools, those systems to do things. So APIs became really common. And then data became context, which means you suddenly start to see large amounts of data being fed into these models to make them more and more intelligent. Okay, so before I get into sort of what is agentic enterprise, an agentic enterprise is not one bot per employee, which a lot of us do. They're not smarter dashboards or co-pilots. That's just faster humans. There's nothing wrong in that, but that's just faster humans. An agentic enterprise, think of it more of an operating model. If you have an organization, a business, a company, imagine redesigning it completely so that humans and AI agents would work together. They can sense, decide, and act at scale. So productivity is not limited by human capacity. It scales with agent capability. So this all can sound scary, so I'm going to bring it back for you. In an agentic enterprise, yes, you have agents who are actors. Workflows are AI-owned, but humans still govern intent. So back to what Yas was saying, if you scale what she was saying to an entire organization, humans will still need to drive intent, which is what is it exactly that you want to do? You need to tell the agent that. I'm going to go through this really quickly. This is our perspective. You'll start to see organizations that are built across 4 different layers. At the most bottom layer, you've got safety, risk, and compliance. This is your layer where you'll have risk embedded within your AI systems, not later, but from the beginning. Then you've got the agentic execution layer. This is where the magic happens. The multi-agent systems I was talking to you about, all the agents working together, completely automating a finance function or a supply chain function or a marketing function. Then you've got an AI management layer where you've got AI actually supervising these agents. And then right on the top, which is all of you, need to provide that leadership, the human leadership and decision-making on judgment. how do you make sure that AI is actually doing the right thing? So I'll skip through some of the details because I want to show you a real example. So as we get into a story, so this is something we did with an organization out west. So they build systems, they build test systems for large construction projects. One of the challenges was they were heavily burdened with manual processes, lots of admin work, and they thought, you know what, maybe we should switch to an agentic enterprise. What would that look like? So they were really thinking 10x. How do we do more without adding more headcount? How do we do more by reskilling people to do things that are more creative? And how do we get real-time visibility so that we can make better decisions? So I'm going to try to show you this. This is a video. Let's see if it works. Okay, so the context here is that they built an agent that could go in, that's just listening, 24 hours listening. It's identifying that a new construction project has been kicked off. It's looking at many different websites. It then identifies what is that construction project, what is it about, what types of material is needed, what types of systems are needed. It's identified the right construction project for this company to think about. It's now scraping all that data. It's now scoring that opportunity for this company. It's looking at who's the owner of that business, going at LinkedIn and looking at their profile, understanding who they're buying from. It's looking at what parts are they looking for. Would this match the type of things that we sell? It's autonomously trying to come up with a score. And then once it identifies a score, it tells us, got it. It's 10 out of 10. It's a hot pursuit. So then the next thing it does is it says, okay, now that we've identified something that my business can actually sell to, it goes and records that in my CRM system. Remember I said APIs everywhere. It can go connect into my system. It records that information into CRM. It now puts in all the information and it says, oh, by the way, this is already a customer of ours. We've had previous bids that we've submitted. Here's the pricing structure. It creates a quote for me. It's created a potential offer for this client. And then it prepares an email that I can send off, right? So this is an example of an agentic system and an agentic enterprise that is using AI from start to finish. Yes, you've got humans in the loop. There's humans that have to check some of this, but they've really redesigned around AI versus just embedding AI in a few different places. So this is an example of something we've done recently. And then there's, this shows how they're using this information now to make better decisions. Okay, so I just wanted to conclude by saying what you just saw was an example of a complete reimagination of a business. It might sound very futuristic, but I can tell you, this organization, they're not big. They're a 50-person organization, and they're doing this today, right? So what we're seeing is that it's actually the smaller organizations that can leapfrog now because they have the power of AI. They don't need to hire 100 people to do what you just saw. They're able to use AI very quickly to now build systems that can help them compete with some of the large organizations. And so you can see an example here. The cost to get every lead used to be $28. They got that down to $20 using Copilot, and using what you just saw, they got it down to 5 cents. 5 cents to identify a lead. So imagine what that means if you can start to embed this and over a year convert that to sales. It's pretty amazing. And then think, if I could do that for one part of my organization, just for identifying leads, I can now build agents for every part of the organization, whether it's revenue, sales, whether it's, thank you, whether it's pricing, whether it's quality, order fulfillment, you can start to build agents across your organization, and that leads you to a truly agentic enterprise. I'll skip through this, but the only thing I'll say here is the one thing we have to consider is, it's not free. It might sound really fun and a happy story, but building agents is just like hiring humans. You still have to pay for it. Instead of salary, you pay in tokens. So when you're using Copilot or any of ChatGPT, these tools, you're consuming tokens. Tokens are nothing but just another form of measuring how much AI you're using. And then you're converting those tokens into intelligence at work, which is then giving you what you just saw. So there's a lot of controversy right now across the world, including in Canada. How are we going to make sure that we have the capability in Canada to create these many tokens? How do we make sure that it's in Canada? How do we make sure that we don't run out of it? But also, how do we make sure that we understand the impact of that on the climate from a sustainability point of view? So lots of different debates that we can talk about later. I think that's about it. This is where I wanted to end. I just wanted to close by saying, a year ago or a couple of years ago when my colleagues and I used to do these types of talks, we would talk to CEOs and CFOs and boards, and they would try to understand what this is. Now, this is relevant to everyone, all of us, no matter how big your business is or small, or what type of work you do, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're on a board of a big company. Everyone is thinking about this because we're in a moment in time where you've got maybe a few years to create the next billion-dollar company, the next trillion-dollar company. And my encouragement to you would be, all of this can sound very overwhelming, but it's actually all about getting started. You don't want to be the first one, but you want to be a fast follower. And so to be a fast follower, the best thing you can do is get your hands dirty, try out some of these tools, read a lot, hundreds of videos on YouTube about these things. Try to understand it. Not all of it might apply to you, but you'll likely find some idea, one idea or two ideas that you can use to do something new, something innovative, something in your personal life or in your business that will be completely unimaginable. So I'll just pause there and then hand it back to Yas.
Thank you, Nihar. That was both terrifying and exciting, all in the same breath. So we're going to spend about 15 or 20 minutes here learning from just incredible minds at Deloitte. And we're going to go from wealth to regulations to healthcare and life sciences. But I want to make sure that if you have any questions or anything in particular that you want answered, we will make sure there's time and space for that as well. So I'm going to start with some introductions, and then I'm going to get focused. So we're going to start with Stefan Popowitz. So Stefan has spent 20 years building the data infrastructure that lets the most sophisticated investors in the world actually trust what they're looking at. He leads the AI and data strategy for private equity, investment management, and pension funds across Deloitte and its clients. He is the person you call when the gap between your data ambition and your data reality needs to close, and it needs to close fast. That's Stefan. Arslan, I'm going to say Idris. Okay, we'll go with that. Arslan leads Deloitte Canada's life science and aging well practice, digital health, AI implementation, large-scale transformations in environments where the cost of getting it wrong, it's not a missed quarter, it is actually a patient outcome. He advises best managed companies on what AI readiness actually looks like inside a healthcare organization, not in a deck, but in a practice. And I overheard someone stopping him a little while ago and said, I think I saw you at Sick Kids. I think that was so famous before you even showed up. Naomi Chandra. Naomi leads digital trust and privacy practice for Deloitte. She is the person who thinks about what happens when AI goes wrong at scale before it does. Privacy, cyber risk, copyright exposure, governance under regulatory uncertainty. She is the voice that actually tells us what it's going to cost us to build and what it's going to cost us if we don't build it right. There? All right. So we're going to start with Stefan.
All right.
All right, let's
I'm
go.
sorry. That's pretty loud.
Okay. So PE firms, pension funds, investment managers, not organizations short on resources
Yeah.
or ambition. So when they come to you for AI strategy, what's the foundational capability they almost think they have, but they don't?
Thank you for that lovely question.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to make it a little bit more so my name's Stefan. I focus a lot of my time on the private equity and investment management and pension funds. Apologies for my voice. I'm coming across a cold. I'm not contagious. I'm just haven't been able to get rid of it. I help our clients do specifically traditional AI, generative AI now, agentic AI at scale, and how to help them take their pilots and push them into production. But what I'm seeing across most of our PE and pension fund clients is that, and I love that quote you have, because I have a very similar quote around AI ambition. The gap between AI ambition and AI impact has actually widened over the last 15 to 18 months. So it's not necessarily that it's a model issue, because Nihar really outlined it nicely in his presentation. The models are great, no matter what you use. The Gemini, Claude, it's there. It's everything around the organization that is lacking in order for it to take effect. So it's a scaffolding. And really boils down to, and on one of the slides that Nihar had was around what we call an insight-driven organization. So thinking about the people, the process, the technology, the strategy, the governance within the organization, that is really what's inhibiting most of the organizations that we have now. But if you wanted to highlight some of the key factors that I wanted just to draw attention to, one of them would be a modern data foundation is one of the foundational capabilities that's lacking. So it's not like organizations don't have data lakes. So it's whether or not they are AI ready. And what that really means is, do you have a semantic layer? Do you understand? Is there good governance? Is there good quality within your data that you can then take that and scale it for specific use cases? So that's one. A lot of clients think that they're ready, but they're not actually ready to do it at scale. Second one is around AI platforming and engineering. So what that means, it's not data scientists. So data scientists used to be the limiting factor before, but now it's more the engineers necessary to do the ML ops and the LLM ops. So it's how do you operationalize a model? How do you take these agentic or the agents that you build and orchestrate into an agentic organization? How do you take them and deploy them and monitor them to see that they're not drifting? So the organization usually has a couple of really good people that do that. But imagine if you have 100 agents or you have 1,000 agents. So that's, I think, one of the second limiting factor. Another one is around operating model. So again, I'm going to point to Nihar because he's, but operating model and change management capabilities of an organization. So it's not typically the organization that AI is not really an organizational problem. It's the implementation problem, right? The organization is not ready for it specifically, and whether or not there's a change capacity within the organization. So wanting to change. The last one, actually, I'll do two more. Do I have time? Two more. Okay, is around AI fluency. So we see that specifically across most of our clients. It's not only AI fluency at top of house, but it's AI fluency at the bottom levels. So you really need to understand, and the executive needs to understand what AI is and what it is not, what questions they should be asking, and how to push the organization. And similarly, you need AI fluency at the lower levels, because you need to have those individuals excited to try things and test it out. And it needs to happen together, because you don't want to be seen as like pushing AI. It needs to be done collaboratively collaboratively within the organization. The last one I'll mention around some of the limiting capabilities is process maturity. So organizations are really excited to do AI, and they say, we want to do this, this is great, I want to create an underwriting agent, or I want to do this, or I want to create an auto investment memo generator. That's great, but if you don't understand your process, it's a huge problem, and AI, or generative AI, is a really good indicator of process debt, because you'll see it right away. If you don't understand how to do it, it's hard to automate it. So those are kind of the 5 key things that I see from the AI, from the private equity, investment management, and pension funds, where the clients need to be starting to spend a little bit more attention on that.
That's fantastic. I'm going to come back to you around data, because I think it's so important to think through access to data doesn't mean it's data that you can use or that you should use. So we're gonna come back to that in a minute. So thank you. I'm going to go to Arslan now, because I think a lot of people in the room are very curious around health, right? What does AI mean when it comes to health? So one of the questions that I had was, we talk a lot about keeping a human in the loop, right? And we've all sat at our doctor's office and they used to talk to us, and now things have changed. So when I say human in the loop, in the world that you're in right now, can you talk a little bit about that?
I think the first part of the question was more, AI in health. I think we're still figuring it out, right? It's, I think it's, maybe before I answer your question about human in the loop, maybe I want to take a step back a little bit. And it's the state of, because you guys have been hearing a lot about agents, agentic, automation, autonomous enterprise, and these are all real things because we're all working on it. And I'll probably share some examples as well if you have time. But in your real life, either for your loved one, yourself, kids, parents, do you really see that happening in your hospitals, primary care? Like, how many of you have gotten a form that you have to fill? Manually. Right? So it's like, so there's a world that we are aspiring. I'm not selling today, but we are at some days. But there is a reality that we live in. And I think we need to make a realization that it will take time. And that goes back to the point that Nihar was saying, do you want to be the first or do you want to have fast following? So we just got to keep that in mind. The second part for me, and I'm going to come back to the human in the loop, I haven't forgotten the question. But I want to share this story about last week at my first sleep therapist appointment. That's another problem why I can't sleep for another day. She sent me this form. And obviously because I am in this field, so I'm very curious. I filled the entire form. It literally took me 20 minutes to fill the form. It was an old PDF that came through Ocean. So I don't want to blame the system, but I did take the name. It's getting recorded, so not good. I took 20 minutes. I filled every single detail. It talked about, all the details that were so personal related to my marriage, my problems, everything. I filled everything because but it didn't really ask me any question around privacy. And then I sent it. It came to me in my Gmail. I forwarded it through my Gmail to an Ocean email of that clinic. And good luck with privacy for a second. And then I showed up to the call. The doc it was a virtual call, and the doc was a minute late. And she came on a call and she said to me, any problem logging in? Because she's probably just figuring it out. And I'm like, nope, I was there already. She's like, we'll get started. And she's like, do you mind? I'm going to be using AI to transcribe. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I said, actually, I don't want you to use AI to transcribe. There was this pause. She had no idea what to do. Seriously. And obviously, I sent her my entire life history on a Gmail, so maybe I'm not as worried about privacy, right? But I'm sharing it because the skeptical me will sit there and say, she has no clue what to do. But the realistic me, obviously we went on, we had a good session, she still wants to see me next Friday, so I'm still her patient. But the real me was thinking, the real problem in healthcare is the reason why we are in Canada and we love this country, which is equitable access. It's for everyone and all. No one left behind. And we continuously, and folks who work in healthcare, it's a big challenge. It could be 1%, it could be 1% across everyone, but you gotta keep an eye on them, and it costs. It costs the process to keep an eye on, and I wanna share this because I think it's very easy to blame and it's very easy to pinpoint, and I do it 99% of the time, trust me. But there are these moments we've gotta take a step back. Now coming back to the question, I tell stories.
Well, I actually love that, and I realize that I don't need these when I have like Deloitte partners. They get a mic and they just go. So this is fabulous.
And they don't answer the question.
No, it's great.
'Cause we're good consultants.
That's what a good consultant does, right? But you know what? I think you actually teed up Naomi really, really well here. So we're going to come back to some provocative questions. But given your lens and what he's talking about, I mean, you talk about the model of trustworthy AI, right? You lead that. You talk about regulations. You talk about having policies. But does that translate into practice when, even if it exists? Can you maybe talk and share a little bit about that and maybe tell us about your health concern? Because we learned about his asleep.
Yeah, I was terrified about that story. But I recognize it, absolutely. I think it reminded me with a clinic visit. I had a regular checkup. It was about a year ago, and my clinic did say, "You're patient one that we want to try our new AI scribe on." I don't know how they knew that I was a privacy, consultant. They did not know. And said, "Okay, as long as you take me through the consent and you let me watch." And so I saw the results. I saw how much time it really allowed to give back to the clinician and have them looking at me eye to eye versus trying to take notes. And it did a really, really good job. They were not sure about the security settings, absolutely. But they did take their time to have a conversation with me about consent, so I was impressed with that. That being said, the space around trustworthy AI is changing so quickly because of everything you just heard today. Everything is changing from the technology to the use cases to the challenges and the risks. And so the one thing I always say I'm certain of is that there will continue to be uncertainty in this space. When you think about regulations, you mentioned regulations, and often I hear, well, I'm looking for regulatory certainty. When will they make a law that tells me what we can do and what we can't do? They will never make a law that will tell us what we can do and can't do in this space, because it will never get to that level of granularity or specificity that we're looking for. And maybe we don't need it to. But what we will see is thinking about what are the spaces you talked about, intent. I heard language around purpose. Why are we doing this? What are we worried about? So the legislation, if it ever comes, will provide more of a framework. It will look at outcomes, but it will still have organizations in this challenging space of what does that look like for us? What is the impact on the thing we're trying to do when we get much more focused on what we're trying to do? And that means that organizations will always have to do work in the space of trustworthy AI.
So should a company have an AI policy that's blanketed across the organization?
It's a good question. I would say yes and no, because I think yes in the sense that I think every organization has to go through that exercise, and I think you saw a visual where at top of the house, you need to have leadership, you need to have oversight in order to provide that direction that's going to enhance our understanding of what does human in the loop look like for us, right? What do we care about? How do we want to make sure that we're embedding it within our organization, our business, our values? So I think, yes, you have to go through that exercise in organization. What I wouldn't suggest is something that's so broad that it gives you a false sense of security, that it says our job is done. And I think that's where you get to what does it mean, and looking deeper at operationalizing it, getting much more focused. And I always say start first with the business perspective, your strategy as an organization, and then come back to what do we care about as it relates to protecting the use of AI in those specific contexts.
Do you want to respond? I've got a...
No, I just want to add one.
Please, yeah.
So clients are actually asking us to do that in our contracts now. So we have to have AI policies in each one of our statements of work how it's governed, are we using AI, and so on and so forth. So it's coming at the organizational level, but also when we are helping other clients be more efficient using AI.
I think in healthcare, it's mandatory. Not just you have to have an AI policy, you also have to have an AI framework, right? And these are mandatory things because coming back to the actual question I never answered, the AI in the loop. Like, when do you need to have AI in the loop, really? Like, when do you have human in the loop, right? Like, the policy is almost mandatory. I think what's ironic a little bit is that you still see RFPs where the hospitals are asking us to help build the AI policy, which kind of tells you the state of different hospitals, right? Across.
When I hear that, I think policies need to be live documents because they're going to change. I've got one more question, then I would like to open it up. And Nihar, this comes to you. You know, you brought up something and you kind of went over it quite quickly. And I thought, gosh, this is going to be another tax thing. So you talked about the dollars that it's going to cost to be able to access. And obviously you do a lot of work with governments, federally and here. And so you talk about wanting to keep, you know, whether they're data centers or what we're going to do here to be able to manage the energy. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing and what is the cost, like if we're actually using these tools?
Yeah. So there's a lot of geopolitical tension in the system right now. You see there's a reason why you see some of the prime ministers, presidents across the world traveling everywhere, talking to different countries. Yes, they want to do trade and whatnot, but the discussions that are happening behind the scenes are about energy security, data center security. How do we make sure we've got enough energy? How do we have access to data centers so that we can build intelligence? You know, this all sounds like Terminator and all that, but there is this real fear that we will not have enough capacity in Canada to build AI to drive our enterprises to compete with others in the world. So when I think of sovereignty, as AI sovereignty is very real, and AI sovereignty is about data. Where does your data go? It's about access to compute, your GPUs that you hear. It's access to energy. It's also access to these models that are being built. So what happens if tomorrow the US just plugs us out? What happens to all the intelligence in our organizations, right? So it's a serious risk that people are talking about. And all of this comes at a cost, right? Because at the end of the day, you're pulling in power, whether it's in hydropower or nuclear power, that these data centers are fueled. There's a lot of cooling. You know, we in Canada are very lucky. We have no lack of cool temperature. And so that's why you see data centers being built in northern Alberta, northern Quebec, because you can save energy there, right? So that you can bring the cost down. So I think it's a very real discussion in terms of what's the cost. It's hard to tell you the exact number of like what is the cost of an AI system. But we're seeing that the cost over the last 2 years went dramatically down because you had all these new models coming up, and now we're seeing the cost starting to go up. And the reason why it's going up is because before you could just train a model, and so if you've trained it enough and you paid your upfront money, you don't need to train it more and you can just use the model. Now what we're seeing is, even though you train an AI, even when you're using the AI now, the type of things you're doing with it requires a lot of compute. Imagine writing 100,000 lines of code in an hour. Humans would take weeks to do that. People are doing that in a few hours now. That's expensive, right? So the cost is going back up. And so going back to my point, there's a real concern. How do we make sure we can bring the cost down by bringing all the infrastructure around AI within Canada?
Thank you for that.
Sorry, can I just add one more comment?
Please.
So it's also about so token costs, like Nihar mentioning in his slide. Token costs have been dramatically increasing over the last couple of months. A couple of reasons. Because every time you run a model, you have to use tokens in order to make sense of it. A lot of the model costs have been undercut, so they've been subsidized by venture capitalists. in order for us to get addicted to the large language models. And now you're seeing Microsoft about a month ago started doubling or tripling the cost of their tokens. So that's another why. So that's it's very important to think about that. And what we are doing for our clients is to think about reinforcement learning. So what reinforcement learning does is it takes your standard foundational model, like a GPT or whatnot, and then you train it on a very specific task, which costs about 1/20th of the cost when you're actually doing it. And then when you deploy it at scale, that's when the savings really come. Because it's not when you have 1 or 2 or 3 agents, it's when you have 100 agents and 1,000 agents. So the cost is dramatic. So it's thinking about that in addition to the security that we have from an energy perspective. So,
Thank you. I got the hand signal, which means we're open for questions. Any questions? I see a question over there.
Yeah, so my question is about the sycophancy of AI. Normally when you deal with human beings, there's pushback, right? One of the things is that when we deal with other human beings, they check us, they vet our ideas. There's a lot of studies, especially at Oxford, that are saying that AI, unfortunately, doesn't do that. It agrees with you most of the time. And so it's harder for us to know whether our ideas are valid. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
I'll just say, so you're absolutely right. AI, when goes unchecked, is going to do more damage than good. Yeah. And we've seen that happen in many, many examples now, and the examples are going to only increase. So we're seeing there's many ways that guardrails and checks and balances are being put on AI to make sure that it's doing the thing that it was intended to do. Some of these are systematic ways of doing it. You can have AI judges judging another AI. You can have AI supervisors. So we're seeing those types of concepts come up, and some of them work, some of them don't. But then you're also seeing that as AI is being used, you have humans coming in at certain steps to make sure that it's doing the right thing. And so what's interesting is, a lot of us think AI is going to come and take away a lot of jobs. But then it's also creating a lot of jobs as well. There's going to be a lot of jobs that will just be about checking AI, validating it, and making sure it's doing the right thing. And so it is a real problem, what you say, but I think there's systematic and human ways we're seeing that'll keep improving.
Yeah, I think to add to that, and also what you've mentioned around guardrails, one thing that we keep in mind is what I've mentioned around purpose as well. And so what we've seen organizations do is really try to limit what is that purpose that they're using the solution for. And so in cases where they think it's just going to agree with them, potentially changing the perspective of just provide some information to me, and as you mentioned, provide a challenge function. Tell me what I'm not seeing, right? And so making sure that you're also understanding the relationship that you have in those conversations with an agent, but potentially where do you place yourself or a position or a perspective between agents to make sure that you are continuously really thinking about what's the role I want them to play, and making sure that you're then complementing the human ecosystem with the agent ecosystem.
I'll just add one more comment. So taking the concept of judge, what we're seeing now in certain organizations is a council. So it's a council of judges. So you have one that is an optimist, and one that is a pessimist, and one that is a specialist, and you have them all fight amongst each other. And then the output would then be, should be the right way, that you should go forward. So it's taking that concept and taking it to the next level. Which we're seeing, which is fascinating.
Yeah,
It is so
seeing
fascinating.
AI argue with an AI is hilarious.
I'd like to see your history, for sure. I saw another hand go up over here. Yes, please. Yeah, one here, and then we'll go over there.
Thank you so much. That was such a great panel. So interesting. So I work in AI fluency and adoption, and I actually just wanted to hook on what you were just saying. The issue I see with human in the loop is that when you get these AIs that are really good, that human in the loop job becomes so small and so repetitive, unless it's at the judge level, right? For like regular mid-managers, what is that going to mean for job fulfillment? Wharton just had a study where they tried to have a human in the loop check output. And once you're reading that, after a while, you get to a point where you check out. And so when you were looking at those processes, they actually doubled compensation for the person, for the subjects in the study. It was a small study. They couldn't make them pay attention enough to catch those issues, right? And there's so many studies of AI in recruiting, and when they give them biased candidates, 9 times out of 10, they still go with them and they're not using their own thinking. And then you have, as you said, I think you were saying, yes, Yasmine, that you're going to have those people that are thinking through like the subject matter experts, but then they get those outlier cases that are really messy, and they're the ones who have to pull those apart. It's not the easy ones. So you have kind of the human in the loop that's doing the repetitive piece that makes me think of, Henry Ford and assembly lines, and you're just kind of putting on the horn on the car. And then you have the other people that are getting kind of the messy outlier cases that really have to go deep. And all that to say, I think about sort of the jobs that are going to be available, and it makes me concerned that they're going to be these sort of repetitive jobs, or they're going to be deep in these kind of outlier cases. What is your perspective? What are you seeing around that?
Well, I think I'll start maybe first with a personal perspective, and then kind of think about more from a professional perspective what we're seeing in the ecosystem. But personally, what you said very much resonated with me, and I think if anyone who's tried to do validation as a subject matter expert, you get partway through, you just, as you said, you can check out, right? And so personally, what I've been looking at is how to keep the creativity really with those who are new to the space and experts into the space, and bring those people together. So I would say that within our workplace, I think I haven't done more whiteboarding now than I have in the past. I think we've done that much more because we've been able to create moments, but you have to intentionally do that to bring people together in spaces together and be creative. And there's been a lot of moments where people on our team have thought, okay, I'm going to do the first draft. And I said, actually, don't do the first draft using AI. Have the solution challenge you on your first draft. Have it start to create, but keep the creativity in order to be able to learn the really tough stuff and to be able to become an expert. So I think that's one thing that we've done, and also because you need that element of fun, that element of fulfillment, but also element of learning and challenge. From a professional standpoint, and when I'm thinking of some of the other spaces where we've supported organizations, you have to really understand what is the impact on the organization. So we do work with a number of change management experts who are thinking that is a reality. The jobs will change, and I think we have to be really aware of that and understand what are we going to do to make sure there is fulfillment. If the roles do change, as you've mentioned, what are those new roles? And I think we've seen that over time, that there are going to be interesting roles around orchestration, but how do we keep it creative? How do we emphasize that governance, such an important component, we need that, not only happens at the top, but there's different layers of governance in roles where people can make decisions, and they know that they are the decision maker being informed by a solution that supports them to make that decision. Yeah. And I think that allows people to feel that there is a level of accountability that they maintain, and there's an ability to be in a role where they have the capacity to maintain their agency over the work that they're doing as well.
Can I just say something?
You sure can, and I know you wanted to talk about that with healthcare as well, so please go ahead.
I'll say something controversial. It's something that, one of my colleagues, he's a philosophy guy, and what he told me was, and going back to your point, he said, humans learn because we struggle. What happens if you take the struggle away? How are we going to learn?
Or they learn different things. Right?
So it's an interesting debate. How do we keep this? How do we flip the message to say, okay, you no more have to learn by struggling, which we've all been taught to do as we've grown up, but maybe now you learn because you really enjoy it, and you want to become good at your job, and you want to be able to be good at working with AI. So I don't have the perfect answer, but I think there's going to be some sort of a transition period where you'll start to see that some people in their jobs will stop struggling to learn, but really enjoying to learn.
I know we have a couple of more questions. I'm going to try and get through them, and then I don't know where the mic is.
I just wanted to segment back onto your point about learning. How do we learn? I think at the AI level now, learning is not as relevant as it is being able to ask a question and give it an answer. I think historical learning, for some of us that grew up with books, the need to go and struggle to learn, has been eliminated. You need an answer, you pick up your phone, you ask a question, you get an instant answer with a very high probability of accuracy. So I think the learning that we now need to do is prompt engineering for everybody. It's to be able to articulate what it is you want an answer to, and that's the real learning. To think, the basic fundamental essence, which seems to have been lost because we've been so automated. But I just wanted to segment that 2 cents.
Yeah, around rational thought process. So a lot of people don't realize that prompt engineering is actually a really good answer for that. Your prompt shouldn't be like 2 sentences. Your prompt, in order to get the best out of a large language model, it requires context. So my name is Stefan. I am a partner at a professional services firm. I focus on private equity and insurance and investment. I'm having a conversation with this particular, you need to go into extreme amount of detail for it to give you the best answer, and that it's like rational thought process. Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to give a slightly different lens. I think absolutely we need, and we are training people to do prompt engineering absolutely every day. But is that the skill of tomorrow? Or is that the skill of and a need of today? And I'm asking the question because for us, for example, we were training you to do basic prompting. Everybody has to be there. Now, as part of my team, because we're building this platform as a product that we're taking to the market, all product managers have to write prompts, create it into skills, put it into a repository. So the next person does not need to write that prompt. So what I'm trying to certainly say is, and I was reading this article the other day, that the prompt engineering might be dead 12 months from today. So it's almost like the skills and the jobs are also evolving. It's a fascinating but scary time at the same, right? So we got to keep that in mind, that it's today absolutely a necessity. 2 years from today, is prompt engineering going to be as critical as it is today?
No way.
Because you'll have agents that can write the prompts for you.
Well, that, and you can go into your skills in Claude, and it's already done for you, right? I had another question that I'm going to go.
Yeah, over here.
Oh, you already got the mic. Let's go.
I've been holding on to it for a while. First off, thank you for taking the time and speaking with us. I just had a question about, of course, agentic and Gen AI are great, but how do you justify the cost? I mean, we just had an executive at Uber saying he burned through his entire AI budget in Q1. How does that, where do you draw the line?
So I'll take a first stab. I'll tell a story first, and then I'll talk about the justification. So the story is around, we were doing a piece of work. We didn't do this work, but we were talking to a client, and they had a job, and the job, I can't remember what the job was doing specifically, but it cost about $120,000 to have this employee do this task. And then they created an agent to replace this employee, right? And it ended up by costing them about $140,000 or $150,000 a year to run the same task, so $30,000, $40,000 more expensive. So it can escalate quite quickly. The justification comment or question you have comes around, what's the intent and what's the purpose of you doing anything from a AI or generative AI perspective? So if it's going to cost you X amount of dollars, you would think it would provide some sort of efficiencies around operational efficiencies, or help drive increased revenue or decrease risk, which is also currency. And if it doesn't, then yes, 100%. You need to figure out how and why you're justifying the spend just to do an AI project. But it really all depends on the organization and what they're trying to accomplish.
I think, can I add, because I think there's an element of obviously the right sizing piece. I think when I look at the space of privacy and cybersecurity and actually keeping up, I think there's also a cost to not using AI in that space. We are absolutely not able to keep up without AI. And so I think there's an element to making sure it is right-sized to what we're trying to do, but knowing that there's some areas that we still don't know about or vulnerabilities that we haven't detected that we need to get ahead of before our adversaries do. And so I think that's one element to the cost conversation. And I do think, I think there was a comment around collaboration and really thinking about coming together as an ecosystem. And I think that's something that's really important in this space. In some areas that are going to be really expensive, potentially for organizations who cannot afford that, but they need that service, they need that security, they need that safety for their business to operate. And I think that's where the discussion is going to continue to go, is how do we make sure we have the right models to support those really, really important outcomes.
I think you bring up so many points in that ecosystem plays, cybersecurity. You know, many people here, we're faith-based, right? So we do a lot of stuff on tools that may not have the same regulations that some enterprise places have. So it's something for us to be thinking about as well. I got time for one more question.
Can I sneak one in?
Oh, sneak one in, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and then yes. So two more questions.
All right, thank you. So Canada is known for its banks globally. And the question is around the level of disruption. So I'm just looking at my phone here, and I'm seeing Ant Group Financial, which is a Chinese fintech, has 30,000 employees globally, and they serve approximately 3.5 billion people, and they connect, that many number of people on their platform. JP Morgan, let me pull up my phone here. JP Morgan, known as like the best bank in the United States, employs more than 300,000 people, and they serve only 80 million consumers. So can you tell me what your thoughts are with Canada and how the level of disruption can be affected?
Maybe I'll speak from the lens of healthcare, right? It frustrates, right? Like you can go to Qatar, and even our global life sciences and healthcare leader, this is the global one for Deloitte, she talks highly about Qatar or Singapore, right? But I think at the end of the day, one of the things for us is that while it's frustrating at times because the pace is not there, but it comes back to the thing that there is a lot that already exists, and changing with a legacy system is a very complex environment. And then on top of it, the lack of policy and too much policy. So your data is owned by you, the hospital, the primary care, I don't know, like it's not as simple, right? Like, and we're just doing a prediction model for a hospital right now. ALC, alternative level of care, for those who understand it, is one of the biggest problems in Canadian healthcare. I think it's a term invented in Canada, alternative level of care. So if we can figure that out, it will be awesome, right? So we are predicting it 2 to 5 days in advance who's going to become ALC. But one of the most important factor in ALC is your financial aspect. But can you actually figure that out in that prediction model? So there's a lot of legislation and gaps as well that we have to keep in consideration when you look at some of the other countries' example that you were giving. The rules and regulations are weaker. I'm not justifying it, it's just the world around us is very complex. I don't know if you guys want to.
Can you repeat that last one? Is it open banking?
Yeah, isn't open banking around the corner?
It is around the corner. Yeah, we are primed for disruption. So the answer to your question is a lot more complicated. We don't have time to go into it. Asia is a totally different market, and I would say the types of financial instruments or what they're providing to those clients could differ. We've done work for some insurers of 100 million clients, right? And you're talking about 3.5 billion people. It's very, very different. Canada is very regulated from a financial institutions perspective. I would argue that we were very well protected during our last fiscal crisis. So I would want to know whether or not that organization was around, even when that stuff was going on. It's very different economies of scale. We have 38 million. Like all of Asia is it's absolutely massive. I had the luxury of spending time in Hong Kong at the end of last year. I went twice for business. They are at a different level. Everything is digital. Everything's digital first. And everything is plugged in. So we don't have that type of connectivity from a digital perspective. And with the open banking, we're going to be ripe for disruption. But it's going to be good. It's going to provide different services and open it up. But I go back to my comment around Canada, the Canadian financial system is very heavily regulated, so it kind of protects us a little bit. But we can chat after if you want.
Last question, and then we're still here. So please grab anyone, okay, to ask the last question. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone on the panel today. My question is about climate justice. I work in public education, and one of the things that we're thinking about is the impact on the natural world. So I am not a business person. I am a principal in a school board, and I'm wondering if anyone can touch on the impact on the natural world, because we've talked a lot about the human ecosystem, but we live in a natural ecosystem. And when we talk about equity, I think your context is financial equity. My context is equity between humans and our relationship between the world that we live in. Canada has some of the best access to natural water, but we also know that a lot of the data centers are being built in places where there aren't as many resources, and then around the world what that impact looks like. So I'm not expecting a full-on answer right now, but I'm just wondering, through this conversation, can we please touch on that? Because we need our kids to have a world that they can live in, breathe fresh air, and have access to clean water.
So you've touched on a very, very important point. So, I come from a very interesting educational background where I studied AI and sustainability together. And I try to reconcile this in everything I was doing, and why are we doing this and why not. So what you're saying is absolutely right. So you'll see there's a lot of debate right now. In fact, there's lots of activist groups that are going after the US data centers and saying, oh, what happened to the water there and whatnot. My hope is that they're focusing on the facts, because if the facts come out, there's a real reason why data centers need to have the regulation to be built in certain areas only for certain types of uses. The government of BC a few months ago said, no, we're not going to divert our precious renewable energy to data centers. We're going to allow it, we reserve it for our people. And so now they're doing things to allow for excess capacity only to be diverted to data centers. So there's things happening globally now where we're seeing that there is a strong realization that we need to be careful about this. There are other things happening as well, like we're seeing that these hungry models are no more going to be needed to do the types of things that we've been talking about. You can use small models that consume less energy. And we're seeing a whole new wave of innovation happening in the way these models are going to be used that will consume less energy. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we're seeing, the optimist on my side sees that that might be a good way of going forward. We're seeing data centers starting to, soon be built in space, because we don't want to be built them, whether that's good or bad, that has other impacts, who knows? But it's a reality. This is where we're at. I'll just say that this is not the first time this has happened. When steam engines came out, it was the same conversation. When computers started to become a common thing, when the internet exploded, there were other side effects we were talking about. So there's always side effects. AI is just taken it to a different level. And so, we're seeing that there are methods being employed to make it better. But my personal belief is I think government really has to step in to regulate data center growth around the world. The challenge will be, how do you compete against China? How do you compete against countries that don't have the regulation that we have? So what happens to those balances? So,
yeah, I think one thing I would add, I think I started saying that regulation won't tell us exactly what we should be doing or can do or can't do, not to that level of specificity. But I do think there's a lot we can learn from some jurisdictions who are starting to think through some of these larger risks, so these really foundational, generational risks. And when we look at some jurisdictions like EU, who has their EU AI Act, they've looked at different levels of risk and outlined and said, climate risk is a high risk. it is something we need to think about. And so when you are doing something that has a large climate impact, you have to have additional obligations. You have to assess the risk. You have to have different types of safeguards. So I think that's an important cue. And when I work with organizations, even if they're not subject to the AI legislation, I say, look at how they're identifying some of these larger future risks, and what can we be doing now as organizations to assess and modify the way that we use solutions so that we have a better tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions. And thank you for giving your time and knowledge. It's a huge privilege for me personally, and I can speak on behalf of everyone. So thank you. Please stay, have some refreshments.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yasmine, Nihar, for those really insightful remarks. Naomi, Stefan, and Arslan, I think we can speak for everyone here when I say you've certainly given us a lot of food for thought. Thank you all for taking the time to share and be here for this thought-provoking conversation. I would like to offer our sincere thanks to the event organizers and to our volunteers here at the Ismaili Centre Toronto, without whom constant support, these events could simply not happen. And thank you everyone in the audience for choosing to spend your time and evening here with us. This evening is far from over, and we invite you outside to continue these conversations over delicious refreshments and networking in our atrium. Our volunteers will guide you there, and we thank you all for joining us. We would love your feedback through scanning the QR code, and if you'd like to stay in the loop for future events, please do sign up for our newsletter, and have a lovely evening. Thank you.